Ghadi Francis is one of our most popular guests of all time. She's also Lebanese. She's an author, a journalist, and a war correspondent, and a regular and eloquent guest here on the mother of all talk shows. Ghadi, welcome back. These are momentous times. Our poll seems to have little confidence in this ceasefire deal. Perhaps you'd comment on the level of your own confidence about that. But say something about how this ceasefire deal came into being in the first place.
Hello, George. Today, people are resharing the last time I was with you on the Mother of All Talk Shows, where I started my bit by saying how proud I was to be Lebanese, and the deterrence was still being um, made on the ground. The heroic, steadfast resistance was in the actual soil of Lebanon, as we spoke last time. Today, we are speaking on a day of a ceasefire that wasn't given by a kind-hearted Israeli war criminal. It wasn't given by chance or by the charity of the diplomacy of the world that cares about us or our hospitals or our residential buildings or our capital or everybody that was killed and the bombs that were thrown and the tons of bunker busters that were raining on our cities and our homes and our villages. These did not stop because they like us all of a sudden. They stopped because they could not prevail, because they could not pass, because they could not succeed, and they could not take it anymore. They could not suffer the losses that were happening on the ground. The idea of 500 plus times of sirens in Tel Aviv is existential when we're speaking about an entity like Israel. This is what brought the ceasefire. And then I go back to the first part of your question. Do I trust it? Do we trust Netanyahu? Does anyone trust Netanyahu? Do we trust this? The world's empire is fighting these indigenous people of Lebanon and Palestine. This is a NATO-backed war on us. So do I trust that they're going to change their mind after they have comfortably lived a year of televised genocide? I don't trust them. But I definitely trust the capacity, the rooted capacity of the Lebanese people that has been proven for a third time in the most recent history just today. I believe and I trust in the potential and the military potential that the non-state actors of the axis of the resistance have proven once again. This is why I trust that new rules or regulations, at least for the time being, have been put. We don't know what happens next, though, but we know we're ready to face it when it does.
How did it happen? You've very well explained why, but how? The Lebanese armed forces, who didn't fire a shot in defense of the country, in my life actually, but they actually were ringed around the village of Khayyam yesterday, and they did fire at their own people who were seeking to return to their largely destroyed and definitely damaged houses. The Lebanese government, which is scarcely a government nowadays, has no president, and is a plaything for the big powers, particularly the United States and France, perhaps secondarily. But there was no place at the table for the people doing the actual fighting. So what was the mechanism by which this agreement came to be?
I think the undoing of Sykes-Picot has started a while ago in the region. And the undoing of the status quo or the rules of governance inside the shape of Lebanon have been changed and altered on the ground by the people and by the demographics and by the status quo. And this is only articulated and manifested by what you have just stated, sir. You see a Lebanese army, we don't even have a president. How is that state really working? It's very logical to ask. But this is why I think it is a time in our history, especially for people, for veteran people who have been involved and watching closely the Palestinian and the Lebanese resistance groups for the past decades. It is a time for us in the history to look at the idea of resistance. It's not states anymore. It is non-states, if you look at it, because actually the nationalistic and the state banner for Palestine did not prove anything, especially after the normalization. This changed the actual idea that states or Arab nationalism would fight for Palestine. And ever since the 80s until today, it was non-state actors that actually took that lead. So today, I don't find it um, unlikely that without a government, without a president, without even the Lebanese army involved, we could see the Lebanese resistance fighting back, because this has been the case at least for the past 4 decades in Lebanon, at least, to say the least. But to explain to your viewers, sir, how did that happen on the ground? And to explain and to dismantle the idea of any Israeli victory here, because they were very good in shooting videos, but even those videos were debunked simultaneously. As soon as they were publishing videos of themselves parading in their flags in our homes and inside our villages, it was not hours after that until we had seen different videos of them being targeted. So the media warfare and the idea that they could very easily invade Lebanon was dismantled directly and on the ground by other videos and rushes from the operations and from the resistance and the resilience of the fighters in the south. And they put the target that they want to get to the Litani River, sir, after 1 year of bombing from afar and 8 weeks of trying to invade with tanks and airstrikes and missiles and intelligence, and after hitting all kinds of targets from logistics to fighters to the pager attacks. They weren't able to get anywhere inside any village and stay, and they were able to penetrate into Litani River waters exactly around 1.5 kilometers into the borders. Now, military-wise, this is nothing. And these are areas that were actually occupied within maybe hours by Israelis throughout the history. And from the military perspective, Hezbollah didn't really need to protect them to continue fighting the Israelis. So I think when they tested the waters or the grounds of Lebanon, they got the answer. They got a direct answer from these people that we're willing to take that risk and to open a war until you want. We're willing to continue having new rockets and new missiles and to get to Tel Aviv and to shower with more than 350 rockets in one day within hours. So doing that after all these weeks, I think sent the message that Benjamin Netanyahu didn't want to listen to Gallant when he said it, and didn't want to listen to his army generals or to the American negotiators. I think the rockets that the resistance rained on Tel Aviv did deliver the message that day. This is what we're living to see today.
Now, the Lebanese political scene has always been, you'll forgive the pun, Byzantine, impenetrable, very difficult to navigate with all kinds of nuance and so on. And I don't mean that in a good way. It's always been the position of Hezbollah that they could, of course, take over power in Lebanon, could have done at any time. The great majority of the population support them, but they did not want to. They had no wish to. They did not want to disturb the sectarian, confessional, and even ethnic and precarious scales of the Lebanese state. It seems to me that that must be now in some doubt, because if Lebanon doesn't have a state but is in fact a kind of 1950s fleshpot hotel room lounge where all the intelligence agencies, all the Western spies and so on conspire against the Arab identity of the Lebanese, then maybe that's not a balance that should be retained.
Well, if I'm listening when I listen to you talk about Lebanon and the way it has been governed, this is exactly my opposition domestically in domestic politics to Hezbollah as a political party. Because we've been suffering the idea, exactly what you have very eloquently stated here. We've been suffering the idea of the local antagonizing that is happening for all our past. Their problem with Hezbollah is that the Hezb is fighting Israel. So, and Hezbollah has always been more empowered if they wanted to govern. And I think it's just something like playing in your comfort zone. Sometimes you are in a toxic relationship, but you can't get out. I think there's a kind of relationship, a formative relationship between Hezbollah and the Lebanese state. And here there is the nuance of the presence of the one and only ally, Nabih Berri, which is the Speaker of the House and a very basic and needed part to remain for the state of Lebanon in that shape. I think there is an untold alliance that was made in the 90s, and it is only time to reconsider what it has brought to these people and to that resistance, and what cons and what pros. I am one of the people that believes that any comfort zone in a toxic relationship doesn't work. It's only a matter of courage. And that toxic relationship between the Lebanese people and that sectarian regime has been botched since the Ta'if, since after the civil war. It was never actually security. It was never actually peace between people or sects, because it is a sectarian regime that remained sectarian. And even they didn't even do the whole Ta'if treaty of after the civil war. They kept parts of it to keep their positions and their power as ex-civil war lords. So in general, Hezbollah's relationship to the Lebanese state wasn't really needed until after the Syrian presence in Lebanon ended in the 2005. And they say, and they would argue, that they entered into the Lebanese state only to protect themselves. And then they would tell you that years after that, it was in the Lebanese government where the conspiracy was being held against the database of the resistance and so on. These are things that were happening in the domestic politics, sir. And they would argue, people would argue, that the presence of Hezbollah and that system is kind of protective for them and is kind of peace to ensure the Lebanese society is all like all nuances, what you try to be polite by calling nuance. All this actual sectarianism would be like under the carpet, you know, we'd hide it under the carpet and but it's never gonna work until you build an actual society. So in general, I would agree with you that the relationship between Hezbollah and the state is not right. But I think Hezbollah, especially Sayyid Nasrallah, was in a kind of untold treaty to keep Lebanon as it is, to ensure that society, that diversity. This is the challenge of the future.
Yes, of course, that's true.
Nasrallah.
I used to say, Ghadi, in Parliament, you're talking about democracy in the Arab world. If there was democracy in Lebanon, Syed Hassan Nasrallah would be elected president in a landslide. And you don't want that. I know that you don't want that. I used to taunt the government ministers with that. Listen, a last question, if I may. It's a painful one to ask. It's a painful one, I'm sure, to answer. The usual suspects, the sectarian, the takfiri, the fanatics, whose countries and icons have not lifted one finger to defend the people in Gaza, have not supplied one gun, one bullet, 1 ounce of strength to the people in Gaza, are out today saying, we told you so. We told you that these 12ers, these Shiites, it was all performative, and they've now left the Palestinians entirely alone. They don't go on to explain, well, maybe Jordan or maybe Turkey or maybe Egypt or maybe Saudi Arabia will come to their aid. No, they know that that will not happen. But they are today dancing on the grave of the idea that the Palestinians could always count on their northern front. I know you don't speak for Hezbollah, neither of us does, but what do you think their answer to that would be?
I think they don't care about the opinions, especially of these imbeciles. And we are living in the times of actions. I don't think Hezbollah would really care to answer, especially Said Nasrallah was telling the supporters throughout all the speeches during this war, don't even answer them or their narratives. But I think today a good answer would be looking at their very revered and trusted Avichai Adrai, since they do not trust the resistance or Shiites or Arabs or resistance axis, and they trust the Israelis and the Zionist propaganda. I'd like them to take a look at what Afichai Adrai said happened today. They said that they confiscated weapons being sent from Iran to Palestinians inside Judea and Samaria. This is what they call them. So in general, I'd like to take a moment to look at them. I mean, is Afichai a liar? Or is Iran sending weapons to Palestinians inside who are being harassed and who are being stranded and taken dehumanized day in, day out? In both cases, I mean, this is an answer. But in general, Hezbollah, the society without the tags of the religion or the sect, the Shiites have given all these stances for Palestine, and it is not uncoupled yet, and it will not end until the dismantling of the Zionist entity. They have given their 3 times of displacement and then destruction and reconstruction. They have given their sons, their husbands, their fathers, their daughters, their doctors, their journalists, their banks, their infrastructure, their roads, their universities, their schools. They have given their homes in the most beautiful villages, I'm sure, George, you have visited in Lebanon. They have given and sacrificed their peace of mind. Trauma, again, to a new generation. All that has been given to Palestine, and we don't have this kind of relationship with Palestine. And Palestine doesn't have this relationship with us. We both know that we're fighting for ourselves against one dragon that wants to kill the future of both our communities. So we don't have this kind of exchange, who paid more. So you can only see these voices coming from people who have never fought against Israel. That's why neither the Palestinians nor the Lebanese really do care about them.
Very good answer. Thank you, as always, Ghadi Francis. A very great pleasure to see you again, albeit
Thank you, George.
Pretty dramatically bad circumstances.